Game players, how are you guys doing? I want to welcome you guys to the Analog Circle Roundtable discussion. Now, guys, it has been a while since I have recorded, but my goodness, I am coming back with a very, very special guest. Now, we all know that we're so passionate about this gaming culture. Everybody has a preference. Some people love Sony, some people love Nintendo, some people love Microsoft. Other people have their preference with their different developers. Some people love Naughty Dog, other game players love Rockstar. But the thing is, nobody ever talks about how you and me, being the consumer, can actually take our passion, this thing that we love so much, and actually be able to get money out of it, to invest in these different companies and put your money where your mouth is if you believe so much in these different companies. And I have with me a very special guest who is going to go into further detail about how I can, as well as yourself, be able to invest in these companies and get money as a result. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and even if your pet is listening, welcome him or her too. I want to welcome to the show Mr. James Lambs. What's happening, brother?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
I am so happy for you to be here. Let me tell you, it is such an honor and such a pleasure. Now, listeners out there, you may be wondering, how did I meet this gentleman? Well, he wrote such an amazing article that went into detail about these different companies. You guys definitely should check it out. Matter of fact, James, could you please tell the listeners out there where they can read this article that you wrote that was so great? It was very, very great.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I blog on a website called Seeking Alpha, which is not purely games related. It's a place for people to talk about companies and stocks they find interesting. But I focus really on video games just because, just like yourself, I love games, love all things, and I got into this kind of as a side hobby and started writing about it. But recently I wrote an article about Take-Two Interactive, and also wrote an article about Nintendo. But yeah, you guys can find me if you just go to seekingalpha.com and just search for my name. You'll have no problem finding me.
Absolutely. Now, James, if it's okay, brother, could we just jump right into it? Just jump into a little bit of the meat and potatoes of what it takes to actually get into this side of the gaming business.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Now, I've been wondering I guess the first thing, we got to start at the beginning. How can you start investing your money into these different gaming platforms? Do you have to seek out a certain person at the bank? Do you have to go to a certain website? I mean, how can a person get started?
Yeah, sure. No, it's with the internet being the way it is nowadays, it's incredibly easy. It's probably the easiest it's ever been. So really all you need is a brokerage account, which is pretty easy to find. There's a lot of companies. You've seen the ads on TV, TD Ameritrade, Scottrade. If you really want to just do it the cheapest way possible, there's actually an app on your phone. It's called Robinhood. One word, Robinhood. You can Google it if you want to check it out. But usually a brokerage account charges you a fee for each trade. It can be, let's say, $5, $6, $7, $8, sometimes $10. Mm-hmm. Robinhood has no fee, so each trade doesn't cost you anything. It's really good if you want to start with a small amount of money and just play around. It's really the best thing I can advise is just start reading about companies, man. Just, pick companies you like, and then look at them the way you would normally look at them in terms of what games do they have coming out, what hardware do they have coming out, what's going to be the next big trend. and then just figure out what's the stock ticker, right? So Nintendo uses a ticker NTDOY. Microsoft. These are pretty easy to find, right? I'm sure everybody's familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's real easy. You just get on your brokerage account. You say, okay, how many shares do I want to buy? You throw some money in there, and then you buy, man. And it gets a lot more detailed than that, but at its most basic level, I mean, really that's it. And then you're a stockholder. You own shares of that company, and the success or failure of that company has a financial impact on you from that point forward. So it makes you care even more about how they do,
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. It definitely will give you a different mindset, when your hard earned money is behind one of these companies. Now, then you would really have a reason to get upset if the company isn't doing as good as they should be doing. That's definitely, right. I guess the next thing I would like to ask you, James, in your personal opinion, what are some of the best gaming companies to invest in? I mean, of course, you have companies like Ubisoft, you have Rockstar, which is, of course, under the Take-Two umbrella. You have other companies like Naughty Dog, that's under Sony. But what are, to you in your personal opinion, like I was just asking, what would be some of the best companies to put your money behind?
Yeah, so when you think about it from the perspective of a gamer, you got to remember these companies some of them are very diversified. Like, so for example, Microsoft, the Xbox is a real small slice of what Microsoft is doing on the whole, right? Sony, PlayStation is a big thing with Sony, but also remember Sony does a lot of other stuff, right? So you have some companies that are really specialized, like for example, Nintendo. And then you have other companies that are really diversified, like say Microsoft, right? So let's say you really believe in the new Xbox. Well, you got to look at Microsoft as a whole, as compared to some of these other companies, like let's say Square Enix, right? Or Take-Two Interactive or Activision Blizzard, that are much more focused on games. EA, for example, is another one. So what I like to do is I kind of look across all of them. The companies that I like, and to be fully transparent, I do own some shares of Nintendo. I love Nintendo. I think they have a really bright future. If you guys start looking into this, you'll see that Nintendo has earned the share price has almost doubled over the past year, right? And a lot of that is really just because the Wii U was a failure, right? I like it. I own one. I enjoy the games on it, but it wasn't marketed super well. The public at large didn't really feel it, right?
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons, but the Switch has been a really complete game changer though, right? You have the DS and the 2DS kind of getting old.
Mm-hmm.
I think at a certain point in time, Nintendo is going to just completely discontinue that, and then you're going to have just the Switch, right? And you look at the demand for Switch. You look at the demand for the Super Nintendo Mini. You look at the demand for the NES Mini. I mean, people love Nintendo. I mean, they love Nintendo. I love Nintendo. I mean, not just because they make me money, but also I just love Nintendo. I mean, there's a certain joy that they create when you play those games, right? For example. So you just got to pick a company like that you feel passionate about, and then just start doing your research and looking ahead. I like to look, let's say 6 months to 12 months ahead and say, in the next 6 to 12 months, is there going to be more positive, things, more positive developments that are going to happen? Or do I think that the things that they have on the future don't look so good, right? Or maybe I don't agree with the strategy, or I don't really like what they're doing. And so you got to really kind of get ahead of the press, right? The press cycle is like, let's say quarter to quarter, month to month.
Yeah.
You got to be looking 6, 12 months down the road and say, what's the next big thing that people aren't talking about yet, that people don't see yet? And to me, that's where you really want to consider. So that's the article I wrote about Take-Two was really focused on Red Dead Redemption 2, which I think is going to be huge. I think the online component, if they learned from GTA 5 Online, which I don't know how familiar you are with that, but it's pretty cool.
Goodness, it's amazing, man.
It is, and they've made a ton of money off of GTA 5 Online.
Yes, they have.
But that's, that was a 2013 release, right? So we forget how old that is. That's a pretty old release. It wasn't designed with the current consoles in mind. That's a last gen game. right? And they just brought it over. So imagine what they can do starting with the current gen, and then imagine what they can do if they build Red Dead Redemption 2 with everything they've learned from GTA 5.
Oh my
right?
goodness, that would be
and
amazing.
Online, right? Exactly, and there's nothing like it out there, right? I mean, there's no Wild West online. There's no, that environment and that theme, I think, to me, will be successful. And so that was kind of the pitch of my article, was just really like, guys, the market's not fully appreciating how big Red Dead Redemption 2 is going to be. The first Red Dead sold about 15 million copies.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, but if you compare that to GTA 5, GTA 5 has sold like 80 million copies. Yeah, right?
It's so amazing.
Yeah, so just think about that. 80 million copies of GTA 5. That's insane. That is insane. It's crazy. So if Red Dead 2 can even capture, let's say it even does 20 or 30 million, it even does a fraction of GTA 5. I mean, I think it's clearly going to be more popular than the first game, just because it's on more people's radars now, and it's going to be the first like marquee release Rockstar has had in a long time. Right?
I agree. And at least almost 5 years, right?
Yeah. So the first Red Dead, I think, came out, I want to say 2011.
It was around there, maybe 2010 or 11, somewhere around in there.
Yeah. So it's been a long time, and that is I know everybody listening is gonna be a game fan, right? Diehard. Most of us, true gamer fans would not argue amongst ourselves that Red Dead Redemption is an excellent game.
Amazing.
Regardless of how you might feel about the setting or whatever.
Oh, it was amazing.
The story's good, the gameplay's good. It's an awesome game, and it even holds up today. You can go back and play it right now, and it's still good. So I'm real excited about Take-Two, and we're just focusing on one thing they have going on. There's other initiatives they have going on with what they're doing in competitive gaming with the NBA. They own the XCOM franchise, so you have XCOM 2. There's an expansion coming out for that. So there's a lot going on there. So that's kind of what I'm saying. Get in the mindset of look ahead, look down the pipe, and say, what are these guys doing? What is Nintendo doing in the future? And does the market fully appreciate, do people really fully appreciate how big it's going to be, what they're doing,
Right.
That's the way you got to think.
Absolutely. Now, the interesting thing, I have to say this as well. It's one thing about Nintendo. Now, I have to tell you, James, I got to be honest with you, brother. I have not been a big supporter of Nintendo since the Nintendo 64. And I'm going to tell you why really quickly. I just did not agree with some of the moves that Nintendo started to make, even including the N64 era, when everybody else was pushing the CD-ROM format forward. Nintendo wanted to stick to cartridges. It just seems like, for me, now this is personal. It has nothing to do with the financial side, but Nintendo just seems like they're always behind the curve, of everybody else. And when they had the Nintendo Mini, which is just another situation that made me dislike Nintendo a little more, they had it in such limited quantities, James, where I'm like, man, you get them in the store, you get 5 of them, and that's it. But I will say the most amazing and impressive thing about Nintendo is their games attachment rate is astronomical. Nobody has a higher attachment rate with their games and their console. It was at one time, I believe, Zelda had actually sold more copies on the Switch than the Switch had actually sold.
Yeah, people are buying 2 copies of it.
Yeah! Which is amazing. And you have a game like Mario Kart on I believe it was the Wii or the Wii U, one of those. It sold 10 million copies. 10 million. And then you have something like Horizon Zero Dawn, which was a sensational game. I haven't beat it yet, but I have played it. Sensational game, and it sells a little over 2, and it has triple the user base of a Nintendo system. So I guess they always say too, James, that the games are where they make their money. That's where they predominantly get the money from. Not so much the hardware sales, but software. Do you know if that is a real true statement or not?
Yeah. I think traditionally it's been kind of the razor blade razor model, where the console is sold for a small profit or even sometimes maybe at a loss. And they really make their money on the accessories, the online stuff, the digital purchases, and the software, right? And I think Nintendo is one of the few companies that I think generally makes a profit on their hardware, a pretty substantial profit. And for example, let's say the new Xbox coming out, if you look at the hardware that's in that bad boy,
man.
It's hard for me to see that Microsoft's making a whole lot of money off of that. Maybe they're making a few bucks, but
I think Phil said they're pretty much just gonna break even on that deal.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a strategy, right? And that's one way to go for sure. But if you look at, I'm pretty sure Nintendo's making a profit on every single Switch that they're selling, and so you brought up a really good point. So Nintendo, in that article I wrote about Nintendo, there was some comments where people were talking again about, the whole console wars, right? And I'm doing air quotes right now, console wars, because I think Nintendo doesn't even play that game. They don't go head to head against Microsoft. They don't go head to head against Sony. And they clearly said to everyone, we're not trying to be the most graphically intense powerhouse. They have completely taken themselves off of that track, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they do some weird stuff sometimes. They do, absolutely. 100% agree. I mean, look at the Wii when it came out, the whole concept of the motion controls. Everybody said, you guys are crazy, this isn't going to work. And the Wii sold, tens of millions and even to people that weren't traditionally gamers, right? I mean, to completely casual people that never even maybe bought a game other than Wii Sports, right?
Right.
And that's always been Nintendo's way, is just to kind of do things a little differently. And, it doesn't always pan out. They do take a lot of risks. But if you look at what they're doing with the Switch and you look at that concept, and, I don't know if you have a Switch or not, but I was able
yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I was able to find one. It's real hard to find, but I was able to scoop one up when it popped on the market. And I can tell you, it is a sweet piece of technology. Everything feels good. It's fast. A lot of the complaints people had about the Wii U and the responsiveness of the UI wasn't good. It was slow. The convertibility, the portability. I mean, it's a nice piece of hardware, and they need more games for it, clearly. But if you're a believer in Nintendo, they're going to release, the games are going to come, right?
Gotcha.
And so you look down the road, you look at Nintendo, is going forward, is this going to be another Wii U type situation, or is this going to be another Wii type situation, right? People that have a 3DS maybe are looking to upgrade, right? And that's a pretty substantial user base, and those people are going to buy Switches going forward, right? People that had a Wii U, not very many of them. I'm one of them, but maybe the people whose last interaction with Nintendo was a Wii, maybe the Switch catches with them, because it's priced. It's not a premium price point. It's not $600, right? It's not cheap. But it's portable, and it's kind of like a tablet, if you can watch Netflix on it, if you could use it at least sort of like a tablet, people I think get that nowadays. So yeah, I think Nintendo going forward strategically is making smarter choices, and it seems like they're modernizing a little bit more than they have historically. They're using their licensing and their IP a little better, right? They've got this Universal Studios, Nintendo Land thing happening.
I know, man. I'm actually really interested in that.
I mean, imagine you go to Universal Studios and you do Mario Kart with, in the theme park, right?
I mean, know, it'd be amazing.
So they're clearly, I read somewhere that they're trying to pursue some potential animation or movie stuff a little bit harder than they have in the past. So they seem like they're finally kind of turning the corner a little bit, and they're figuring out how to market this thing better, how to get the software on it, how to reach out to the indie developers better. That Switch is a perfect little device if you like indie games,
Wow.
And so anyway, I'm gushing a little bit about Nintendo. I love Nintendo.
Hey, it's all right, man.
I know they can be strange. They tend to do their own thing. They march to their own beat, but they really differentiate themselves, and that's what I like about them. It's really something that is special, and regardless of if you love Nintendo or not, I think you can appreciate what they've done for the industry, right?
I agree. I 100% agree. I'm definitely hard on them But the last thing I want is for Nintendo, and I've said this a billion times on the podcast, I don't want them to go away. We need them. The industry needs Nintendo. We really do. So hopefully, like you said, they're changing for the better. I thought that another positive sign that they showed was actually teaming up with Ubisoft for the Rabbids game with Mario and the Rabbids, which is something Nintendo has never done in the past before. So it is definitely some spots of sunshine that are going on over on Nintendo's side. Oh man, I guess coming off of the different companies to invest in, and I appreciate you actually covering that as well as you did. I guess I would have to ask, how much does it take to actually get started? How much, currency should you put up, to actually, start to invest in these different companies?
Yeah, so it can really vary, and it really depends on the individual person. I would say if you're going to use Robinhood and you're just going to kind of do this casually to mess around, I mean, $100, you don't need much to start. Now, you're not going to make a ton of money just because, they always say it takes money to make money, right? But when you're learning and you're just kind of exploring and experimenting a little bit, I always suggest to people for initially, think of it like tuition. Right? You might make some bad choices. You might lose. You might really not make much, or you might kind of break even, or you might actually lose everything you put up front until you kind of get used to seeing the trends and managing your risk and not overextending. You want to be diversified. So, for example, I wouldn't suggest to anyone to take their 401k out and stick it all in Nintendo. Ooh. I would say that's a bad idea. Please don't do that. But, if you have a little bit of money on the side that, is just sitting around and you can afford to invest it and you can afford to let it sit and you could even afford to lose most of it, figure out what that amount is for you and start small if you've never done this before. And, just pick, 2 or 3 companies that you think look good. It's a challenge right now because the whole market is a little high, right? So it's hard to find those kind of, there's nothing selling on a discount right now. You know what I mean? There's no sales. There's no sales. That doesn't mean there's not a good deal, but there's no obvious sales right now. You know what I mean? So, but if you're investing for the longer term, right? So you have 2 things to do. You could speculate or you can invest, right? Investing tends to be a little bit longer in time, right? Let's say a year, 18 months, 2 years, and you're investing based on the actual kind of underlying strengths of the company, right? And how it's going to perform long term. And then there's people that do sort of short term speculating, which is not what I recommend, right? That's like, you hear about like day traders and people trying to just make a quick buck.
Yeah.
That's real hard to do. There's a lot of like random things that can happen. The stock price bounces around all over the place day to day. You can't look at it that way. You got to look long term, right? So what I like to do is I like to pick a moment in time that is when I'm going to make a decision about what I'm going to do, right? So, for example, my Nintendo I have, and I wrote this in my article. I have a pretty good stake in Nintendo. When am I going to get rid of it, right? I've already made some money. Do I want to close that out and take my profits, or do I want to leave it? Well, I want to wait and see how the Christmas holidays do. I want to see how Q4 does, because that's really when Nintendo peaks, right? Think about the Super Nintendo Mini. Think about the Switch, and in my article I write that I believe, and I think most people would probably agree with me, the hottest items this Christmas are going to be the Super Nintendo Mini and the Switch, if you can even find them, right? You got Mario Odyssey coming out, right?
I know, that's a big one.
You got some system movers coming out, man, on that thing, and people, when your average consumer and your average kid looks, what do I want for Christmas? I find it hard to believe that something from Nintendo isn't on that list, right? And so I believe Nintendo's going to have a really big Q4. And so given that, I'm looking at how does that go? How does that play out? Maybe around Christmas time is when I'll consider selling my Nintendo, because, you always want to pull it out when things are high, right? But maybe you look even further than that. What does Nintendo have coming out next year? Right? Can they continue to move this thing? You got maybe a Pokemon game coming out next year for the Switch?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You got Monster Hunter probably coming out pretty soon, maybe in Japan first and then maybe over here. Right? You got a lot of big indie games coming out. So I mean, this is the way I think about it. So after Christmas happens, I'll make a decision. Do I want to hold it or do I want to get rid of it? And if it's hold it, I'll pick another point in time. Let's say another, maybe E3 or something, right? Whenever the next big kind of cycle happens. And then I'll make a decision there. So that's how I do it. I like to because it forces you from making quick emotional decisions, which is what will kill you when you invest. Is panicking, right? Just panicking and making emotional decisions will ruin you investing. You got to be really calm. You got to have a plan. You got to stick to the plan. That's the way you can invest and make money, right? So that's what I would recommend everybody. Find a company you like. Find your horse that you like. Figure out a point in time in the future, figure out, an amount of money you're comfortable with, and then, let it ride, man, and just see how it goes, and then follow it. Follow the news, follow the performance of the company, read the earnings reports, right? And you'll find it's pretty exciting. And it puts on a whole nother level, this whole idea like console wars and things like that. It puts your excitement on a whole nother level. It's just like betting on sports, man, is one way to look at it. So
that's actually a great analogy, actually.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, let me ask you this too, James. How do you think Microsoft and Sony are going to fare this year, especially more so Microsoft because they have the Xbox One X coming out. Now, of course, that price tag, it's definitely a premium product. $500 is a nice chunk of money. I think it's worth it considering the tech that they're putting in there, but how well do you think they're going to do this holiday season?
Yeah, so Microsoft and Sony are interesting right now because what you have happening is Sony is pulling ahead. Sony is kind of getting a little cocky, right? You saw them at E3, they were kind of like,
oh man,
hey, we're Sony, like we've got, a bazillion consoles, we're killing everybody, right? Microsoft
Definitely
is not even in the picture. And they're kind of, what happens is they might get a little complacent, right? They might kind of slow things down a little bit, maybe. Sony is killing it with the first party exclusives.
They
right?
are.
You got this new God of War, you got Naughty Dog, everything that those guys are doing. I'm assuming there's going to be a new Last of Us coming out pretty soon, right?
Oh, definitely.
You've seen the teasers for it, right? So, so Sony is just wrecking Microsoft on the exclusives this time around. But what Microsoft is doing that I think is really smart is they're aligning themselves with the PC gaming community. They have the Windows platform, which is where everyone plays PC games, and they're positioning this new Xbox as potentially a very inexpensive way to play PC games, right? Because if you listen to some of the interviews with Phil Spencer and some of the way they're looking at this thing is they're doing the Xbox kind of as a platform. Right. And I think in the future, you may not even have like console generations there. It might just be more like the way we look at a PC. You just upgrade it every couple of years, but you still have access to all the games.
Right.
And imagine if you could, instead of building your own PC for $1,500, you could just buy the new Xbox for $500 and play everything, more or less at, 60 frames per second at a good resolution on your TV. I think that's an angle they have on Sony, because Sony doesn't have Windows, right? They don't have PC gaming. They're their own ecosystem, totally independent of that. But, Microsoft is doing a good job with cross-platform. If you can play it on your Xbox and you can play with all your friends, good example is PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, right?
Oh man. Quickly, have you played this game? I know I'm going on a side note here, but how have you enjoyed that game out of curiosity?
It's great, man. It's tense. It's very tense, and it's definitely in early access, so it's kind of janky, but it's fun, man. It's really fun, and imagine if you have a Microsoft product, you have an Xbox, whichever version you have, and you can play with all the 4 million people on the PC.
Oh,
maybe I don't know. Maybe you don't want to because they all have keyboards and mice, and you have a controller.
Right, a pad.
I don't know how they're going to work. I don't know how they're going to work that out. But the point is they're doing stuff there that Sony really can't do. I mean, you could end up with this game on a PlayStation platform maybe in the future, but in the near term, these PC games that end up on a console look like they're going to end up on an Xbox platform more likely than a PlayStation, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty solid strategy, I think, and I believe that Xbox might be turning the corner here. We'll see how the Scorpio does at $500. Is expensive, but it's a premium product. It's not for everybody. But they are clearly kind of trying to remedy and fix some of the mistakes they made with the Xbox One. You know, trying to sell that thing as a media device when all we want is a game console, right? I mean, I don't need another DVR, man. I just want to play games, you know.
Very true.
Give me good games. Give me first party exclusives. Give me things like that, you know.
Exactly.
But PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds is going to sell millions of copies on whichever platform it comes out on first for a console. No doubts. For sure. So it's a good game, man. And when it comes out, maybe they'll have some kind of a demo or some kind of a beta program on the Xbox that you guys can try out. But it's good, man. It's real good. If you can play it, try to play it.
That's great to hear, because they definitely had a lot of hype surrounding that game at E3. So many people were just singing its high praise and saying how much of a great game it is. So it's refreshing to hear that you feel the same way as well. So many people talking about it in a positive way. They all can't be wrong. So that's awesome. That's fantastic. I guess Sony, you know, I'm guessing they'll do a price drop on the Pro maybe this holiday season to kind of compete against the Xbox One X. Maybe take it to $349.99. You know, take it $50 down from the price tag that it's originally at. But I guess, hey, we'll see. It's always interesting around the holiday season to see, you know, how everything comes out in the wash. But I guess, I also wanted to ask you this too, James. Is there any way to determine how well a company will do, out of curiosity? I mean, now, of course, we know that for Take-Two, you got Red Dead Redemption 2 that's coming out next year. That's, of course, going to spike, you know, the company's, I'm sure there are profits that can be earned. But outside of actually being able to follow, like, so many big releases coming out, is there any other way to be able to gauge how well a company is going to do?
Yeah, there's a lot of strategies for how you can do this, but regardless of what anyone tells you, we're all just guessing, right? Because there's no sure way. It's kind of like predicting the weather. You know, they can tell you that it's going to rain with a 60% chance, but there's still a 40% chance that it isn't going to rain, right?
Exactly.
And it's kind of, think of it kind of like that, right? So if you look at the company as a whole, right, these publicly traded companies release earnings reports quarter to quarter, and there's a lot of information in there you can read about and learn about. There's a lot of numbers, a lot of data, right, about, how much, earnings per share, right? So there's lots and lots and lots of ways to value a company based on just numbers and math, right? And there's all these complex models and all this other stuff. What I like to do is, there's plenty of analysts and plenty of people that are into the weeds of those numbers, understanding them, right? So it's helpful to read some of those reports and just understand them. Mm-hmm. But I like to look at this as as the way a consumer would look at this. I like to invest based on kind of momentum and hype and the way these things swing. And also I like to invest based on how successful I think their upcoming products are going to be, just based on what I know about the games industry, right? So, I've been playing games a long time. I read all the news. I read all the reviews. I listen to the podcasts, right? So I have a pretty good handle on what I think, the next big things are going to be, right? And I like to pick, of those things, which companies are doing those things. And then those are the ones that I really try to look at, right? So how is a company going to do? I'll give you an example. So like Activision Blizzard, when Overwatch was in beta, I played Overwatch in beta. Right? And I love Blizzard. I don't know how you feel about Blizzard, but Blizzard makes
fine.
great. They make great games, right? The most polished. They take an idea, they take a concept, and they polish it into a diamond. It's so nice, right? So they take Magic the Gathering, they make Hearthstone, right? Which sells millions and millions of copies and makes hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So I played Overwatch and I said, man, this is really good. These guys are, they kind of took Team Fortress 2 and did it better, and just, it's so smooth. The characters are so interesting. Like, this is going to be huge, right? And I wrote an article about that at the time. Just, hey, this is going to be the next big thing. These guys are going to make a boatload of money off of this game, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was almost as sure a guess as you could have made at the time if you just had played the beta, right? But these analysts, these guys that are looking at the numbers of the companies, they miss this kind of stuff because they're not in there playing the beta, right? They're not actually like reading Reddit. and
Right.
reading the forums and seeing what is the actual person playing the game think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I think you can add value as a gamer, is what the real people who are playing the game think about the game, because you're one of them, right? And you read the forums, you read Reddit, you listen to the podcast, you hear the hype, you hear the news, and that happens a lot of times before, your average consumer. Like CNN isn't going to run an article about Overwatch until Overwatch is already $50 million or 50 million users, and it's already a thing, right? It's too late at that point.
That is so true.
Pokemon Go. If you knew Pokemon Go was going to come out 6 months before it was released, that's when you get in. Not
my goodness.
Not when Time Magazine is writing an article about Pokemon Go. It's too late at that point, right? You already
missed the bus, right?
You missed the bus. So that's what you got to do, is you got to get into the mode. Like I said, try to be 6 months to 12 months ahead of all this stuff, and always be looking ahead, looking forward as far as you can possibly project, and say, where are these guys going? Like on the horizon, way in the distance, where are these guys going? And you're not always going to be right. Like Microsoft, maybe the Scorpio does just kill it, right? It's amazing. But then for whatever reason, in some of other divisions within Microsoft, they struggle, right? So the stock price could still go down even if the Xbox kills it, right? That's one of the downsides with a company like that. On the other hand, if the Scorpio fails, well, guess what? Microsoft makes a lot of money doing things that aren't gaming related, right? I mean, a lot of money, like without having anything to do with Xbox. And they might even get rid of Xbox one day, right? So that's another thing. It's hard with these really big diversified companies that have so many things going on. Even with a big game or a big release, maybe it doesn't even move the needle on the stock, right? But whereas something like Nintendo, Nintendo, if the Switch had been a complete flop like the Wii U, they really, really would have been struggling as a company for the next, 3 to 5 years, right? Until the next thing could come out. So that was like a make or break moment for Nintendo as a company, was the Switch, and I don't know how much people really appreciate that. That could have almost sunk Nintendo if the Switch had been a complete flop or a complete failure, right?
Yeah.
So, so that's why it's exciting, man. These companies are making some big bets. They're doing some exciting things, and it's a great time to be a gamer, man. It really is. So
I agree 100%. Definitely. Now, the last question, James, just one more, and this is the last one, I promise. With all of these different gaming competitions popping up, you have like MLG, people are playing League of Legends, it's all of these various outlets. How would you recommend a person, if they are interested in investing their money into something like that, how would you recommend a person go about that as well?
Yeah, sure. So I think competitive gaming is becoming more and more relevant. A few years ago it was kind of still a joke, but you look at what Valve is doing with Dota. I read somewhere that this current the national, I think they call it, or the international competition is going to have something like a $20 million prize pool. So this is like legit. It's becoming pretty legit. League is massive, right? But for example, Take-Two has a partnership with the NBA. I think we mentioned earlier. They're trying to do some things there, make some inroads of finding a way to tie sports games into the competitive scene. So I think if you're a believer in that trend and you think that has potential, what I would say to do is figure out which aspect of that seems most likely to succeed to you. For example, I read Activision Blizzard is going to have Overwatch cities, right? So imagine like football franchises, how there's cities for teams. They're going to do something similar with Overwatch. So you're going to have like a New York team. You're going to have a San Francisco team. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to make that play. Activision Blizzard obviously does a lot of other things besides just Overwatch, right? World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, right? There's a lot going on there. But find the company, League of Legends, if you like them, then maybe you want to look at Tencent, which is the owner of Riot Games. So find the trend that you like, find the thing you think is going to be successful. Then of the trend, figure out which one or two companies has the greatest chance of succeeding in that trend, right? And then you got to start doing your homework. You got to start researching, Maybe you think this NBA thing with Take-Two is big. Well, I mean, Take-Two has also got Red Dead Redemption coming. So they got a lot of other things happening on the horizon that are worth looking at. If you like competitive gaming, maybe Nintendo is not necessarily at the forefront, but remember, you got Splatoon coming out, and it looks like Nintendo figured out that, hey, we got something here with Splatoon. Maybe we can turn that into a competitive thing. What about ARMS, right? Nintendo has clearly seen the signal that, hey, this whole competitive gaming thing has a chance, and people, it drives eyeballs to the product, and it makes people excited about it, right? I mean, ARMS is a lot of fun. It's even at a competitive level, it seems to be pretty successful, So you got to kind of just think of it that way. Look at big picture. Say, what is it about competitive games as a trend, for example, that I like or that I think is going to really move the needle and bring people in? And then you got to find the companies doing that. And then of those companies, you pick your one or two best ideas, and then you place a bet, and then you watch it for a while, let's say 3 months, 6 months, and then you just keep checking in with it and see how it's doing. And, I think that's the best way to do it to me. Don't make decisions day to day, make them, kind of month to month, right? Have a plan, have a strategy, and then go with it,
Excellent advice, James. James, I want to truly thank you so very much for being a guest. This has been a wonderful conversation. But before we sign off, could you please give the listeners, if they are interested in reading more articles that you write, could you please give them your contact information of where they can find you or follow you?
Yeah, so I'm on Seeking Alpha, which you can just look me up. It'll be under Jimmy Lambs if you just go on there and do a search for me, seekingalpha.com. Or you guys can always email me. My email address is lambsjames@gmail.com. Love to talk about this stuff, and I'm not too hard to find, so feel free to reach out and go read my articles. I would appreciate it. Put some comments on there. I love to have people disagree with, as long as you're not just flaming me and yelling at me, because that's really how you find the truth, right? Is if I'm gushing about Nintendo, I want to hear all the reasons why you don't think Nintendo's gonna be successful, because I'm not even thinking about those things, So I think there's a lot of value in having that dialogue. So, come tell me I'm wrong, please. If you don't like Take-Two, if you think Red Dead Redemption 2 is gonna be a flop, come tell me why. I'm going to disagree with you, but come and take a shot at it,
Absolutely. Well, listeners, that is it for this episode. And like I said, once again, James, thank you again so much. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. I've greatly appreciated this.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Now, listeners out there, as always, if you want to call in to the podcast, you can feel free to call in at 443-261-4607 and leave your comments or your questions. Or, of course, you can email the show at the Analog Circle Podcast at gmail.com. Guys, I was your host, Keon Mitchell, accompanied by Mr. Jimmy Lambs. And this is going to end it for this week's show. But that's all right, because we'll be back at it again next week. But until then, you guys take care. And remember, it is not about the consoles. It's about the games. You guys take care. Be safe out there. Bye-bye.